The morning sun bounced off Corinne Morrison's pool in geometric patterns that she'd always found deeply satisfying. She'd had the pool installed 5 years ago, back when her divorce settlement had come through. A gleaming turquoise rectangle that cost $43,000 to build and another $800 monthly to maintain. It was, in her opinion, the only good thing to come out of her 17-year marriage to Richard. Corinne stood on her limestone patio, coffee in hand, watching the water's surface with the quiet contentment of someone who'd earned exactly what she wanted. The house sat at the crown of Maple Ridge Estates, a gated community on the edge of town that had been developed 15 years ago by someone with more ambition than taste. Still, it was the best house in the neighborhood. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a finished basement, and most importantly, a pool that faced south and caught sun from dawn until dusk. She'd made sure of it. When she and Richard had first looked at properties, she'd insisted on this lot specifically. She'd calculated the sun angles, driven by at different times of day, marked exactly where the shadow from the oak tree in the northeast corner would fall at various seasons. Most people would have called this obsessive. Corinne called it due diligence. That was at the heart of everything Corinne did, this fundamental belief that the world operated on a system of logic and fairness, and that those who paid attention, who worked hard, who planned meticulously, would get what they deserved. Her garden was the best maintained on the street. Her car, a pearl-white Mercedes, was always spotless. Her morning routine never varied: shower at 6:15 a.m., meditation at 6:45, breakfast at 7:00, at her home office by 7:30. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, and she'd been regional manager for 3 consecutive years. Everything in her life was exactly as it should be. That's what made what happened at 8:47 a.m. on Saturday morning so profoundly wrong. Corinne had gone inside after her coffee to check her emails. She had a video call at 9 with the Denver office. They were finalizing contracts on a new drug distribution agreement, and she wanted to be fresh, prepared, commanding. She changed into her power suit, a tailored navy blazer and matching pencil skirt, kitten heels, a silk blouse in cream. Her silver hair, which she had professionally highlighted every 6 weeks, was blown out into a perfect bob. Her makeup was immaculate. Neutral palette, the blush and lipstick she'd been wearing for 3 years because it was timeless and worked with her complexion. She spent exactly 9 minutes reviewing the documents on her desk. At 8:56, she heard it. A noise from outside, not loud but distinctive, something splashing into water with considerable force. Then another sound, an engine, possibly a truck, pulling away quickly down the street. Corinne's head had jerked up at that moment, her mind already cataloging it as unusual. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour. Most people were still sleeping or having their weekend breakfast. She stood up from her desk and walked to the sliding glass door that overlooked the pool. What she saw made her freeze. The pool was no longer turquoise. The surface was covered in a thick brown, distinctly organic sludge. Not all of it, the far end remained partially clear, but a massive quantity of what could only be described as cow manure had been dumped into her pool. The smell was just reaching her now, wafting through the house's air conditioning system. A horrifying, unmistakable stench of livestock waste, old and fresh somehow simultaneously, mixed with something acidic and wrong. For a moment, Corinne simply stood there. Her mind couldn't quite process what her eyes were seeing. It was like those moments in dreams where something fundamentally impossible occurs and you know it's impossible, and yet it's happening anyway. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was something far more terrible, a scream of betrayal, of violation, of something sacred being desecrated. Corinne rarely lost control of her emotions. She prided herself on her ability to compartmentalize, to assess situations rationally, to find solutions. But standing in front of her pool, her beautiful, perfect pool, covered in cow shit, something inside her broke. She ran outside in her kitten heels, which immediately sank into the soft ground near the patio edge. She grabbed the pool skimmer, the expensive one she'd special ordered from a pool supply company in California, and began frantically trying to remove the sludge. The skimmer's net immediately became clogged with thick, wet waste. Tears ran down her face, cutting through her carefully applied mascara, ruining her makeup. She made desperate, animalistic sounds that didn't quite sound human. No, 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 no. She dropped the skimmer and stood at the pool's edge, breathing hard, her hands shaking. She could feel the rage building in her chest, hot and terrible and all-consuming. Rage like she hadn't felt since the day Richard had told her he was in love with his dental hygienist, Brittany, age 28. Someone had done this. Deliberately. The implications crystallized in her mind with terrible clarity. This was vandalism. This was a crime. Someone had obtained a truck full of cow manure, not an easy task, requiring actual planning, and deliberately driven it into her neighborhood to destroy her property. The pool would need to be professionally cleaned. The water might be toxic. She'd need to call the city, probably the police. There would be investigations, repairs, costs. The homeowners association would need to be notified. There would be meetings. Someone would be held responsible. And Corinne Morrison would make absolutely certain that she found out who. She went back inside, carefully wiped off her heels with a towel, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Maple Ridge Estates Security, the private company that managed the gated community's entrance. She spoke to Derek Hammond, the head of security, a man she'd always found competent if somewhat slow to understand the seriousness of matters. "Derek, someone dumped cow manure into my pool this morning. I need access to the security footage from the last 24 hours. I need the records of every vehicle that entered and exited the gates. This is a crime scene." Derek had sputtered a little. "Ms. Morrison, I will look into it, but—" "There's no but, Derek, someone did this. I heard a truck leaving. I want that footage within the hour." The second call was to the police non-emergency line. Corinne explained the situation clearly and calmly, all traces of her earlier hysteria controlled and channeled into precisely articulated sentences. She provided her address, the time she'd discovered the incident, a description of what appeared to have occurred. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer to file a report. Then, and only then, did Corinne call her pool maintenance company. She reached Marcus Chen, who had maintained her pool for 4 years and was usually irritatingly cheerful about the business of water chemistry and filtration systems. This morning, his cheerfulness seemed to evaporate the moment she described what had happened. "Cow manure," he repeated, as though she'd said something in a foreign language. "In your pool." "Yes, Marcus, what I'm asking is, how long will it take to clean it? What will it cost? Can the pool be salvaged, or does it need to be completely drained?" There was a long pause. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "I'll need to come out and assess it," he said finally. "But Corinne, this is going to be a complete drain and refill. That's not something I can do on my own. We're talking about bringing in specialized equipment. We might be looking at a week to fully clean and rebalance the system, and it's going to be expensive." "How expensive?" "5,000, maybe closer to 7. Corinne closed her eyes. $7,000. Her rage, which had briefly plateaued, surged again with renewed intensity. "Come out here," she said. "Immediately, I need estimates. I need to document everything. And Marcus, I'm filing a police report. Whoever did this is going to pay for every single penny." She hung up the phone and took several deep breaths. The meditation she'd scheduled for this morning had been preempted by violation and destruction, but she was using the same techniques now: in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Her heart rate slowly decreased. Her hands stopped shaking. By the time Marcus arrived with his equipment and camera at 9:30 a.m., Corinne had changed out of her power suit and into something more practical: white capri pants and a lavender polo shirt. She'd reapplied her makeup. She'd also printed out photos of her pool from the previous week, pristine shots she used for her next-door posts about neighborhood life. When Marcus saw the pool, he actually whistled, a low, uncertain sound. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. "Do you know what did this?" "Someone dumped a truck full of cow manure into my pool," Corinne said coldly. "Someone who wants to ruin my life for reasons I don't yet understand, but I will find out who, and they will pay." The police officer arrived at 10:15. His name was Officer Ryan Matthews, and he was younger than Corinne would have preferred, late 20s, with a face that still looked boyish. He seemed uncertain about how seriously to take the incident, which infuriated her further. "It's property damage," Corinne explained, making sure to speak slowly as though he might otherwise not understand. "It's vandalism. It's destruction of property with estimated damages in excess of $5,000. I need this investigated. I need the security footage. I need to know who has been accessing the gates in this community." Officer Matthews took notes, photographed the pool, and promised he'd file a report. He didn't seem to think it was particularly urgent. That casual dismissal of her situation, that fundamental failure to recognize the seriousness of what had happened to her, would later turn out to be a mistake on his part. By noon, Maple Ridge Estates HOA president, someone named David Finch, who Karen had never been particularly fond of. He'd once questioned her proposed modifications to her landscaping, called her. "Ms. Morrison, Derek Hammond filled me in on the situation," David said, his voice cautious. "I wanted to reach out personally." "Thank you," Karen said, though she didn't mean it. "I'm sure you understand this reflects poorly on the entire community. We need to establish what happened and why. We need to ensure our security systems are adequate." "Well, about that," David said, and she could hear the reluctance in his voice. "Derek reviewed the footage, and actually, Karen, can I call you Karen?" "You may not. What about the footage, Mr. Finch?" "The footage shows that the truck actually came from inside the community, one of our residents." Karen felt her stomach drop. She sat down on her pool lounge chair, a luxury outdoor furniture piece that had cost her $1,800. "What?" she said, her voice suddenly very small. "The truck entered the community through the gates at 8:43 this morning. It was driven by someone who lives on Sycamore Lane. The security footage is clear. Derek identified the truck, and we've already contacted the driver. They're claiming it was an accident." Karen's head was spinning. One of her neighbors, an accident. Those two concepts didn't fit together in any meaningful way. "An accident?" she repeated. "How do you accidentally dump an entire truckload of manure into someone's pool?" "I know this sounds strange," David said, "but the resident involved is claiming that the truck bed latch came loose while they were driving and the manure spilled out as they drove through the neighborhood. They're saying they didn't know most of it had ended up in your pool until they parked the truck." Karen stood up very quickly. She stood so quickly that the lounge chair nearly tipped backward. "Who?" she demanded. "Who is this resident?" "It's Jim Caldwell. He has a farm just outside the community, does some supplemental agricultural work on weekends. The truck belongs to his farm." Jim Caldwell lived 3 houses down from Karen. She'd seen him exactly twice, once in his driveway, once at the community mailbox cluster. He was a large man, probably in his 60s, with weathered skin and hands that looked like they'd done physical labor. His house was shabby by the standards of Maple Ridge Estates. The gutters were never clean, his landscaping was minimal, and he had a detached garage that appeared to be falling apart. He was, in Karen's mental classification system, the sort of person who didn't really belong in a community like this. The sort of person who would own livestock trucks and be careless enough to let them spill their contents all over someone else's property. "I want him charged," Karen said flatly. "He needs to pay for all the damage, all of it. The pool cleaning, any damage to the filtration system, the cost of the water, my emotional distress. Everything. I don't care if it was an accident. He was negligent. That's still his responsibility." "Karen, let's not jump to conclusions," David began. "My pool is full of cow shit, Mr. Finch. How should I conclude?" She hung up without waiting for his response. For the next hour, Karen sat at her dining room table and made a list. Not an angry list. She was too enraged for that kind of cathartic emotional expression. Instead, she made a systematic, organized list of everything she would need to do, everything she would need to prove, every way in which Jim Caldwell would need to take responsibility for what he'd done. She documented every receipt related to the pool's maintenance and original installation. She called her homeowner's insurance company and reported the incident, learning that her comprehensive coverage would cover some of the damage, but not all of it, and there would be deductibles to consider. She called a personal injury attorney she'd once consulted on a property matter and described the situation. She took detailed photographs and videos of the pool from multiple angles, being careful to capture the full extent of the contamination. By 2:00 p.m., she had 17 pages of notes. She had also made a decision. She was going to handle this herself. Jim Caldwell would not get away with what he'd done. Karen had spent her entire life believing that the world responded to logic and effort and documentation, that if you were wronged, you simply had to prove you were wronged and justice would follow. She had never been particularly interested in confrontation, but neither was she afraid of it. She was going to make Jim Caldwell understand exactly what he'd done. She was going to make sure everyone in Maple Ridge Estates understood exactly what he'd done. And when it was over, when he'd paid for every penny of damage and apologized profusely for his negligence, Karen would have her pool back exactly as it had been. Perfect. Clean. Hers alone. She didn't know that she was about to discover that sometimes the world didn't operate on the logic she'd always believed in. She didn't know that people weren't always honest, and that truth wasn't always simple, and that sometimes being right and being believed were two entirely different things. All she knew was that someone in her neighborhood had violated something sacred. Jim Caldwell answered his door at 3:45 p.m. wearing a faded John Deere cap and a shirt with a coffee stain on it. He looked confused when he saw Karen standing on his porch with her phone in hand and a folder tucked under her arm. "Ms. Morrison," he said, his accent thick with a rural drawl that Karen had always associated with a certain lack of sophistication. "I was wondering if you'd come by. Look, I'm real sorry about—" "I'm not here for an apology," Karen interrupted, her voice cutting and precise. "I'm here for an explanation and for the information I need to file a civil suit against you. I've already contacted my attorney. This will be handled formally." Jim's weathered face fell. He glanced over his shoulder as though checking if anyone else was listening, then stepped out onto his porch and closed the door behind him. "Look," he said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. "I know what it looks like. I know it's a mess. But you gotta understand, the latch on the truck's hydraulic bed has been acting up for weeks. I was gonna get it fixed last week, but I've been slammed with." "So you acknowledge that you knew the latch was faulty," Karen said, already typing into her phone's notes app. "That's admission of negligence." No, I'm saying I didn't realize how bad it was until." "You drove a truck full of animal waste through a residential community without securing your cargo properly. That's negligence. That's recklessness. That's destruction of property. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to fix? $7,000 minimum, and that's just the pool. The damage to the neighborhood's water treatment systems, the contamination risk." "Wait," Jim held up his hands. "Karen, can I call you Karen?" "You may not." "Ms. Morrison, then. I talked to Derek Hammond and I looked at the security footage myself. The truck barely spilled anything before it passed by your house. There's no way all that landed in your pool." Karen's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" Jim shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking deeply uncomfortable. "I'm saying maybe not all of that came from my truck." "That's absurd." "Is it?" Jim took off his cap and ran a hand through his thin gray hair. "Look, I get that you're upset. You should be upset. But I'm telling you, from the time the latch popped open to the time I parked the truck, we only traveled about 300 yards. The stuff in your pool, that's got to be, what, a couple tons? That's impossible." "So you're suggesting what, exactly?" Karen's voice was cold as ice. "That someone else also happened to dump cow manure into my pool on the exact same morning your truck had a mechanical failure. That's not more plausible, Mr. Caldwell. That's actually less plausible." "I'm not suggesting anything," Jim said quietly. "I'm just telling you what I know. I'm not lying about the condition of my truck. You can inspect it yourself if you want. The latch failed. Yeah, I was responsible for having it fixed. I'll pay for the damage that actually came from my truck, but I'm not paying for something I didn't do." Karen stared at him for a long moment. She wanted to believe he was lying. It would be so much simpler if he were lying. A clear-cut case of negligence, a guilty party, a legal proceeding, a payment, a resolution. "I want the names of anyone who saw what happened," she said. "I want the exact times. I want you to grant permission for the security footage to be reviewed by my attorney." "Sure," Jim said. "That's fine, but you're gonna find the same thing the HOA found. My truck passed by your house once, going toward the community entrance. The latch gave way. And somehow some of that got into your pool. That's what happened." "We'll see," Karen said, and she turned and walked back down his driveway without another word. That evening, Karen called a community meeting. She did it through the HOA email list, which she'd obtained through David Finch with minimal persuasion. She sent out a message marked "Urgent Neighborhood Safety Concern," in which she described the incident in measured but alarming terms, suggested that there may have been negligence involved, and requested that all residents attend a meeting at the community clubhouse the following morning at 10 a.m. She got 42 RSVPs within 2 hours. That night, Karen didn't sleep. She sat at her dining room table with her laptop open, creating a presentation. She included photographs of the pool before and after. She included screenshots of the original pool installation contract with the maintenance costs itemized. She included quotes from Marcus Chen about the professional remediation. She included the police report number. The officer had actually filed it, which surprised her. And she included screenshots of the security footage that David had sent her, showing Jim Caldwell's truck entering the community, passing down the street. The footage was grainy. Derek Hammond apologized for the quality, but you could see the truck's bed swaying as it drove, could see something falling out behind it. Karen zoomed in and enhanced the image using a photo editing software. It showed something brown, definitely organic, definitely material, definitely spilling. She made a series of enhanced frames and added them to her presentation with dates, times, and coordinate locations. It was meticulous, it was thorough. It was, she believed, devastatingly clear. The community clubhouse held about 60 people at capacity. On Sunday morning at 10 a.m., approximately 45 people showed up. Karen recognized most of them, her neighbors, people she nodded at in the mailbox area, people whose children sometimes played in their front yards, people she'd occasionally seen at the community pool parties, a shared pool, a public pool, which she rarely attended. David Finch stood up first, looking uncomfortable. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he said. "There's been an incident in the community. We've asked Karen Morrison to explain the situation directly." Karen stood, her laptop already connected to the projector. She was wearing her power suit again. She believed in dressing for authority. The first image popped up on the screen behind her. A stunning, bright photograph of her pool from 1 week ago, clear turquoise water, perfect landscaping around the edges, absolutely pristine. "On Saturday morning," she began, "someone dumped a truckload of cow manure into my pool. This is my pool as it was. This is what it looks like now." The second image appeared, the same pool, brown, contaminated, destroyed. There was an audible gasp from the audience. "I've had this pool for 5 years," Karen continued. "I've invested more than $50,000 into it and its maintenance. The remediation is going to cost between $5,000 and $7,000. There's risk of damage to the neighborhood's water table. There's environmental contamination. There's property damage. And there's negligence." She clicked to the next image. Jim Caldwell's truck on the security footage, the bed clearly open, debris falling. Security footage shows that at 8:43 a.m. on Saturday morning, a truck belonging to Jim Caldwell, a resident of this community, drove through our gates with an unsecured cargo. As you can see in this footage, the truck's hydraulic bed failed during transit through the neighborhood. She showed the sequence of images, the truck moving down the street, the sludge falling, the truck continuing. Now Jim Caldwell claims that only a small portion of his cargo spilled during the short distance he traveled before parking. However, Karen clicked to a close-up of the security footage, zooming in on the area around her house. As you can see, a significant amount of material is visible falling in the vicinity of my property. The presentation continued for another 15 minutes. She walked through the police report, the contractor's estimates, the timeline of events, the security footage analysis. She was methodical, she was thorough, she was, as she'd always been, completely prepared. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then someone raised their hand. It was a woman Karen didn't particularly know, someone from the back of the room. "I saw that truck," the woman said. "It passed by my house too. There was definitely stuff falling out of it." "I saw it," someone else confirmed. "It was early in the morning. I remember thinking it was weird." Several other people nodded in agreement. David Finch stood up again. "Based on the evidence," he said carefully, "and our policy on property damage within the community, Jim Caldwell is liable for damages resulting from this incident. I've already informed him that he needs to work with Ms. Morrison's insurance company and pay for whatever the insurance doesn't cover." Karen nodded, her face a mask of satisfaction. The case was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice was occurring right here, right now, in the community clubhouse with 45 witnesses. But then someone else stood up. It was Tom Bradley, who lived on the other side of the community, someone Karen rarely saw. He was a large man in his 70s, with a thick gray beard and a permanently skeptical expression. "I want to say something," Tom said, and he didn't look happy, "because I think there's something here that nobody's talking about." Karen's satisfaction faltered slightly. "Go ahead," David said. "I have a lot of land out back," Tom continued. "I back up to the preserve on the south side. Yesterday morning early, I'm talking 7 a.m., I saw a truck in the preserve pulling out. A livestock truck. It wasn't Jim's truck. I know Jim's truck. It's white with blue trim. This truck was red. It was in the preserve and it had its bed up and it pulled out and headed toward the highway. The room went quiet. You're saying someone else had a truck full of manure? Karen heard herself say, though it sounded like someone else's voice. I'm saying someone else had a truck, Tom corrected. I'm not saying it was definitely the truck that hit your pool, but I'm saying it's interesting that there was another livestock truck in the preserve at basically the same time Jim's truck was malfunctioning. That's all. Karen felt something cold move through her chest. She didn't like this development. She didn't like it at all. Did you report this to anyone? She asked. I reported it to Derek, Tom said. This morning after I heard what happened, thought it might be relevant. Karen looked at Derek Hammond, who suddenly appeared very interested in his shoes. I didn't think it was necessarily connected, Derek said weakly. So you have a livestock truck in the preserve at 7 a.m., Karen said slowly. And you didn't think to mention that when discussing the incident that occurred at 8:43 a.m. The preserve is public land, Derek said. People use it. Someone could have just been parked there, illegally, at 7 a.m. in the morning with a truck full of manure. The reasonable doubt had entered the room now, spreading through the crowd like smoke. Karen could see it on people's faces, the shift from clear-cut guilt to complicated uncertainty. Regardless, David said, attempting to regain control of the meeting, we should investigate all possibilities. Tom, can you describe the truck in more detail? Red, Tom said. I didn't see the plates clearly. I was looking at it from my back fence and the light wasn't great. Could have been a Ford, could have been a Dodge, hard to say. The mystery truck in the preserve, someone murmured, and there was a nervous laugh. It's not a mystery, Karen said sharply. Jim Caldwell's truck malfunctioned. The security footage shows that. The material came from his truck. Whatever else happened is irrelevant. But even as she said it, she could feel the case slipping away from her. Reasonable doubt had entered the room, and once it was there, it was almost impossible to remove. The meeting broke up 20 minutes later, with promises to investigate further, with sympathetic noises about her pool, but with a fundamental shift in the room's energy. People were no longer certain. People were questioning. Karen stood by the projector, collecting her laptop, feeling something she rarely felt. She was losing control of the narrative. That evening, she called Derek Hammond. That truck in the preserve, she said. I need to know everything about it. Description, make, model, license plate if possible. I need a full report. Karen, I'm already having Jim and Tom go back to look for tire tracks. Anything that might help us identify. Who authorized that? Karen interrupted. That's contaminating evidence. If there is another truck, the scene needs to be properly documented by authorities. It's a preserve in our community. It's not really a police matter unless... Unless what? Unless someone dumped waste on someone else's property. That's exactly what this is. The problem was that Derek didn't really understand the gravity of what had happened. None of them did. They saw it as a nuisance, an unfortunate accident, a neighborhood incident to be resolved quickly and quietly. They didn't understand that what had happened to Karen's pool was a violation of the fundamental order of things, a disruption of the logic by which she organized her life. Karen hung up the phone and sat in her dining room, looking out at her pool through the glass doors. It was still contaminated, still unusable, still a brown reminder of her loss of control. She pulled out her laptop and started researching. Livestock trucks in the area, farm supply companies, rental agencies that might provide such trucks. She made phone calls to equipment rental places. She described the truck to each one. Red, probably a Ford or Dodge livestock bed, visible around 7 a.m. Sunday morning in the preserve area of Maple Ridge Estates. By 11 p.m., she'd made 12 phone calls. By 1 a.m., she'd gotten a lead. A place called Henderson Farm Equipment, about 15 miles outside of town, rented livestock trailers. The woman who answered her call, even at 1 a.m., because Karen had found an answering service and paid to be connected to the on-call manager, told her that, yes, they had rented a red Ford truck with a livestock bed to someone at 4 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. Who? Karen demanded. I'd have to check my records, and I can't access those at this hour. Can you call back in the morning? This is urgent. This is related to a potential crime. I understand, ma'am. but I can't access the files without. Karen hung up. She would call back at 9 a.m. She would get the name. She would trace this to whoever had actually dumped the manure. Because if it wasn't Jim Caldwell, if the material in her pool had come from another source, then her entire narrative was wrong. Which meant she was wrong. And Karen Morrison was never wrong. She was meticulous. She was prepared. She was correct. So someone else had to be to blame. She just had to prove it. She sat at her laptop as the hours ticked by, making notes, making lists, organizing data. By the time sunrise came, she had a folder full of research, a timeline that she was going to construct, questions that she was going to answer. At 9 a.m., she called Henderson Farm Equipment. Yes, we did rent a red Ford truck on Saturday, the manager confirmed. The name on the rental is Derek Thompson. He's a local contractor. Paid in cash, which was a little unusual. Brought it back Sunday morning, didn't say what it was for. Derek Thompson. Karen knew that name. She'd heard it mentioned in the context of various community projects. He'd done some work on the HOA building a few years ago. He lived somewhere in the community, she thought, or nearby. She called David Finch. I need the address and phone number for Derek Thompson, she said. He's a contractor who works in the community. Why, David asked. It's urgent HOA business. David gave her the information. Derek Thompson lived in Maple Ridge Estates. He had a house about half a mile from her own. Karen's hands were shaking as she pulled up Google Maps and looked at the address. She was putting the pieces together now. She was seeing the picture clearly. Derek Thompson had rented a truck. He'd parked it in the preserve early Sunday morning, hoping no one would see him. He then dumped manure into someone's pool, a woman he didn't like perhaps, or someone he'd had a dispute with, or someone he wanted to terrorize. The question was, why? And the answer to that question was going to come from Derek Thompson himself. Derek Thompson's house was modest compared to Karen's, a 3-bedroom ranch with aging landscaping and a driveway that needed seal coating. His truck, a red Ford pickup, was parked in the driveway with the bed down. Karen sat in her Mercedes for a moment, composing herself. She'd never been the type to confront people directly. She preferred legal frameworks, official channels, documentation, but this was different. This was personal. She got out of the car and walked to his front door. Derek answered after the third knock. He was a man in his 50s, heavy-set, with grease under his fingernails and the look of someone who'd just woken up. His eyes went immediately suspicious when he saw Karen standing on his porch. Can I help you? He asked, and his tone was already defensive. Derek Thompson, Karen kept her voice very level. Who's asking? I'm Karen Morrison. I live in the community. I believe you rented a livestock truck on Saturday afternoon. I believe you parked that truck in the preserve early Sunday morning, and I believe you dumped the contents of that truck into my swimming pool. Derek's face went pale. What? No, I don't. That's not. Henderson Farm Equipment has records of the rental, Karen said calmly. You paid in cash. You rented a truck with a livestock bed on Saturday, the very same day that my pool was contaminated. You can't just show up at my house and... I'm not finished. I'm trying to understand your motivation. Did I do something to you? Did we have a dispute I'm not aware of? Did I offend you in some way? Derek's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Karen thought he might close the door on her. But then he did something unexpected. His face crumpled slightly, and something almost like pain crossed his expression. Go home, Mrs. Morrison, he said quietly. Just go home and leave me alone. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what you did and why, Karen said. I have your name, I have the rental records, I have the truck registered here. The police are already investigating. All you're doing by not cooperating is making yourself look guilty. I don't know what you're talking about. The red Ford truck, the livestock trailer, Saturday afternoon Henderson Farm Equipment, your name on the rental. Derek stepped back slightly, his hand loosened on the door. I rented that truck, he said finally, his voice low. Okay, I rented it, but I didn't dump anything into your pool. Then what did you do with it? Derek didn't answer immediately. He looked up and down the street, as though checking to see if anyone else was listening. Come inside, he said. Not here, not where people can see. Karen hesitated. She didn't like the idea of being alone with Derek Thompson in his house. but she also didn't like the idea of not knowing the truth. She stepped inside. The house smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. There was clutter on the furniture, clothes, magazines, papers. The kind of disorder that Karen found deeply uncomfortable. Derek closed the door behind her and walked to the living room, which faced the street. He looked out the window for a moment, then turned back to her. "You want to know about the truck?" he said. "Fine, I'll tell you. But after I tell you, I want you to go home and forget about this. I want you to stop asking questions about the truck. And I want you to tell whoever is asking that you were wrong, that you made a mistake, that Derek Thompson didn't rent that truck." "I can't do that," Karen said. "That would be lying." "I know," Derek said. "But I'm asking you to lie, because if you don't, if you keep pushing this, things are going to get worse for you, and for other people." Karen's stomach was churning now. This wasn't following the script she'd written. This wasn't clear accusation and guilt and legal resolution. This was something else entirely, something complicated. "What happened?" she asked, and her voice wasn't quite as steady as before. Derek walked to a cabinet and poured himself a drink, whiskey straight at 9:30 in the morning. He drank it quickly. "I borrowed that truck to move some materials," he said. "Old equipment, wood scraps from a job, stuff that I needed to dispose of. I drove it out to the preserve because I was going to unload it there in a spot where nobody goes. I parked it for a few hours while I did some other work. Then I came back to get it." "And," Karen pressed, "what happened then?" "When I came back, someone had used the truck bed," Derek said. "Someone had dumped livestock manure into it, a lot of it, like an entire load. When I pulled up to the truck, I couldn't believe what I was seeing." Karen's chest went tight. "Are you telling me that someone else used your truck?" she asked. "Someone dumped manure into your truck?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Derek said. "I spent all Saturday afternoon and evening trying to figure out what to do. I cleaned it out the best I could, tried to wipe it down, get rid of the evidence that something had been in it. I drove it around for a while. And then somehow, I still don't know how, I'm not lying about this, somehow it ended up in your pool." Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The architecture of her accusation, the carefully constructed edifice of blame and guilt that she'd built so carefully, was collapsing. "What do you mean, somehow it ended up in your pool?" she asked. "You drove that truck to my house deliberately. You dumped." "No," Derek said, and now he looked almost angry. "No, I didn't go anywhere near your house. After I cleaned out the truck as much as I could, I drove it back to Henderson Equipment and dropped it off. That's what I did. The manure that's in your pool, some of it might have come from that truck, I don't know, but I didn't put it there." "Then who did?" Karen heard herself ask, though the answer was already becoming clear to her. The answer was she didn't know. The answer was it could have been anyone. "I don't know," Derek said. "And I don't want to know. I just want you to go away and stop asking questions about the truck." "You can't ask me to just accept this," Karen said. "There's a crime here. Someone deliberately contaminated my property. It's vandalism. It's destruction of property. Someone is responsible." "Maybe nobody's responsible," Derek said quietly. "Maybe it was just a series of accidents and bad luck and weird circumstances all coming together at exactly the wrong time." Karen shook her head. No, that's not how the world works. People are responsible for what they do. There are consequences. There's cause and effect. There's logic." "Is there?" Derek asked, and he looked at her with something like sadness in his eyes. "You seem like a smart woman, Mrs. Morrison, but I'm telling you, the world doesn't always work the way we think it does. Sometimes things just happen, and all we can do is try to survive them." Karen left his house without another word. She drove directly to the police station where she asked to speak with Officer Matthews. When they sat down in an interview room, she explained the situation with Derek Thompson, the truck rental, the fact that Derek had parked the truck in the preserve. Officer Matthews took notes and promised to follow up. But Karen could see it in his face. He didn't think this led anywhere conclusive. He didn't think there was a clear crime here. He thought it was a messy situation with no obvious perpetrator and no obvious resolution. "So what happens now?" Karen asked. "We'll investigate," Officer Matthews said. "We'll talk to Derek Thompson, verify his story. We'll talk to Jim Caldwell again. We might find a connection, we might not. Honestly, without clear evidence about who specifically dumped the material or why, it's going to be hard to press charges. You could pursue civil action against whoever you believe is liable, but you'd need stronger evidence then." "I need you to find who did this," Karen interrupted, her voice rising slightly. I need you to investigate fully. Someone destroyed my property. Someone deliberately contaminated my home. That's not just some messy situation. That's a crime. I agree it's a crime, Officer Matthews said patiently. I'm just saying we're going to need more information to solve it. We can't just arrest someone on suspicion. Karen left the police station feeling like she was losing her mind. The case that had seemed so clear, so obvious, so absolutely certain just hours ago was now fragmenting into uncertainty. Derek Thompson had a truck, but claimed he didn't dump the manure. Jim Caldwell's truck had malfunctioned, but maybe not all the manure had come from his truck. Someone else had a truck in the preserve, but nobody knew who or what they were doing there. And meanwhile, her pool sat contaminated in her backyard, a brown reminder of a violation she couldn't adequately explain or resolve. She spent the rest of Monday making phone calls. She called the Environmental Protection Agency, the County Health Department, and the State Police. She filed complaints with each of them. She documented everything meticulously. She was going to solve this herself if the local authorities wouldn't. By Tuesday morning, she'd gotten nowhere. The Environmental Protection Agency said that unless she could prove intentional dumping, not accidental spillage, not unintended contamination, but deliberate, willful dumping, they couldn't charge anyone with a violation. The county health department sent out an inspector who tested the water, found it predictably contaminated, and said that the pool owner was responsible for maintaining the water safety, not the county. And the state police said they'd review the case, but didn't have jurisdiction unless a crime had crossed county lines, which it appeared it hadn't. By Tuesday afternoon, Karen realized something terrible. There might not be anyone to blame. Or rather, there might be multiple people to blame and no way to prove which one, and no legal framework to hold any of them accountable. She sat in her living room, staring out at her pool, and felt something crack inside her. Then on Tuesday evening, she got a call from David Finch. "Karen," he said, and he sounded extremely uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet?" They met at the community clubhouse at 7 p.m. David brought Tom Bradley with him, which Karen found suspicious immediately. "What's this about?" she asked. David and Tom exchanged a look. "I've been thinking about what I said at the meeting," Tom began. "About the truck in the preserve, and I want to tell you something else." "Go ahead," Karen said coldly. "I didn't actually see the truck," Tom said. "I mean, I saw something that morning, but I didn't see it clearly. It could have been anything. I got caught up in all the excitement and the mystery of it, and I made it sound more certain than it was. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything." Karen stared at him. "You're recanting your testimony." "I'm correcting it," Tom said. "I was mistaken." "How convenient," Karen said. "Right after Derek Thompson tells me about his rental truck, right after the narrative starts pointing somewhere other than Jim Caldwell." "That's not fair," Tom said. "I'm telling you the truth. I made a mistake. The light was bad, I didn't see clearly. I don't actually know if there was any truck there at all, or if my mind just filled in details because I expected to see something." Karen turned to David. "Is this what you came to tell me?" she asked. "That everything I've discovered is somehow incorrect, that somehow I'm the crazy person here?" "No," David said. "I came to tell you that Jim Caldwell wants to settle. He's willing to pay $5,000 in damages plus the cost of the pool cleaning. He's willing to pay for the professional remediation, no questions asked. He's willing to sign an agreement that acknowledges the truck's cargo damage contributed to the contamination." "Contributed," Karen said. "He's responsible." "We can't prove that," David said. "And Jim is tired of being blamed for something he's not entirely sure he did. None of us can prove what happened here. But we can all move forward. You can get your pool fixed. Jim can stop feeling like a criminal. The community can move on." Karen stood up. "I don't want to move on," she said. "I want someone to be held accountable for what they did to me." "I understand," David said gently. "But maybe nobody can be held accountable. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was bad luck. Maybe it was a combination of things that will never make complete sense." "That's not acceptable," Karen said. "There has to be a reason. There has to be someone to blame." "I know," David said. "But there doesn't actually. Sometimes things just happen, Karen, and all we can do is fix them and move on." The pool was cleaned within a week. Marcus Chen brought in a specialized team that drained every drop of water, cleaned the internal surfaces with industrial chemicals, tested for contamination, and eventually refilled it with clean water. The cost came to exactly $6,483.62, which Jim Caldwell paid directly to Marcus's company. Karen stood at the edge of her pool on the day the professionals finished their work. The water was turquoise again, pristine and perfect, and yet it didn't look the way it had before. Or rather, it looked the same, but something in her relationship to it had changed. She'd accepted Jim Caldwell's settlement. The HOA had required it as part of the formal resolution to the incident, and Karen's attorney had confirmed that it was the best she could hope for given the circumstances. She received a formal written apology, a payment, and a signed acknowledgement that Jim's vehicle and the spillage that resulted from its failure had contributed to the contamination of her pool. It wasn't everything she wanted. It wasn't total vindication and complete accountability and clear justice, but it was something. She should have been satisfied. According to her own logic, according to the system of cause and effect that she'd always believed in, this was a reasonable conclusion. The person she could most clearly connect to the contamination had been held financially responsible. Her pool had been fixed. The neighborhood had been restored to order. But Karen discovered that she wasn't satisfied, because the truth was, she still didn't know what had really happened. She still couldn't explain why her pool had been so thoroughly contaminated when Jim's truck had only spilled a portion of its cargo. She still couldn't account for the mysterious truck in the preserve, or for Derek Thompson's conflicting story, or for Tom's retraction, or for the way the entire situation seemed to have no clear villain. The not knowing was worse than any specific blame. On Friday morning, a week after the incident, Karen was sitting in her office at her pharmaceutical company when she received an email from someone she didn't know, Victoria Sinclair, a name she'd never heard before. The subject line was, "I know about your pool." Karen's heart rate increased as she opened the email. "Dear Ms. Morrison," it read, "I'm writing to you because I believe I have information about what happened to your swimming pool. I cannot meet with you in person, and I cannot identify myself to local authorities, but I can tell you the truth if you're willing to listen. If you want to know what really happened, call this number at exactly 2 p.m. today. You'll have one chance to get this information." There was a phone number, but no other context. Karen stared at the email for a long time. She didn't recognize the email address. She didn't know who this could be or why they would have information about her pool or why they would contact her anonymously. But at 1:55 p.m., she cleared her calendar and closed her office door. At exactly 2:00 p.m., she dialed the number. A woman answered, her voice muffled slightly as though she was trying to disguise it. "Ms. Morrison?" the woman asked. "Yes," Karen said. "Who is this?" "I can't tell you my name," the woman said. "But I can tell you about your pool. I saw what happened. I saw who did it." Karen's body went very still. "Go ahead," she said. "It wasn't Jim Caldwell's truck," the woman said. "Not entirely, and it wasn't Derek Thompson's truck either. There was a third vehicle involved, and the person in that vehicle is the one who deliberately contaminated your pool." "Who?" Karen demanded. "Who was it?" "I can't tell you their name," the woman said. "But I can tell you who in a way. It was someone you know, someone in your neighborhood, someone who had a reason to do what they did." "What reason?" Karen asked. "Why would anyone do that?" There was a long pause. "Because you made them feel small," the woman said finally. "Because you made them feel like they didn't belong. Because you made comments about their house, their family, their choices. Because every interaction you had with them made them feel like they were less than you. And one day, they decided to make you feel the way you made them feel." "That's not a reason to destroy someone's property," Karen said. "That's not justice." "No," the woman agreed. "It's not justice, it's revenge, and revenge is never about justice. It's about making the other person hurt as much as you do." "I want to know who this is," Karen said, her voice shaking with anger. "I want to know specifically who did this to me." "I know you do," the woman said. "But I'm not going to tell you, because if I tell you, then you'll know for certain. And knowing will make you want revenge too. It will make you want to hurt them back, and then they'll want to hurt you back again, and it will never end. This cycle will just keep going." "You're saying I should just accept this," Karen said. "That I should never know, never have justice, never have any resolution." "I'm saying you have resolution," the woman said. "Your pool is fixed. You're made whole financially. The person who did this is suffering too in their own way. They have to live in the same community as you, knowing what they did. They have to see your house, your pool, knowing they violated it. They have to sit at night and think about what they did and feel guilty or angry or whatever it is they feel. That's not nothing. It's not enough, Karen said. I want to know. I know you do, the woman said. But I won't tell you, and now I'm going to hang up. This call will end in 15 seconds. I won't answer if you call back. I won't send you any more emails. This is your only chance, and I'm choosing not to give you what you want. Wait, Karen said. At least tell me why you're telling me any of this. Why do you care? Because I think you should know that it wasn't random, the woman said. Because I think the not knowing is hurting you more than the knowing would. Because I think you need to understand that sometimes the person who hurts you isn't some stranger or someone from another town or someone you don't know. Sometimes it's someone whose name you know, someone you see regularly, someone who decided that the only way to make themselves feel powerful was to make you feel powerless. And maybe, if you know that, maybe you'll think twice before you make someone feel that way again. The line went dead. Karen tried to call back immediately, but the number just rang and rang, reaching nobody. She sat at her desk for an hour, her mind cycling through possibilities. Who in the neighborhood had she made feel small? Who had she judged? Who had she commented about negatively? The possibilities were too many. There were people she'd never been warm to, people whose houses weren't as nice as hers, people whose children didn't go to the same schools, people whose professions weren't as prestigious. There were dozens of people who might have felt criticized by her at some point. Any of them could have done this. That thought was paralyzing in its implications. Karen went home that afternoon and looked at her pool. She considered the fact that she might never know the truth. She considered that the violation she'd experienced might always remain partially explained, partially mysterious. She considered that the person who had done this might be someone she saw regularly, at the mailbox, at community gatherings, in the grocery store, and she would never know for certain. That evening, she did something she'd never done before. She called her ex-husband. "Richard," she said when he answered, "I need to ask you something." "Karen, it's 7 p.m. on a Friday. Can this wait until—" "No," she said. "I need to ask you, did you ever cheat on me because you wanted to hurt me? Or did you cheat because you wanted something else and didn't care how it hurt me?" "What?" Richard sounded confused. "Where is this coming from?" "Just answer the question." Richard was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I think I was an asshole and I did what I wanted without thinking about how it would affect you. I don't think I was trying to hurt you specifically. I was just being selfish. Does the distinction matter?" "I don't know," Karen said. She hung up the phone and sat in her living room as the sun set. The light turned the pool water from turquoise to deeper blue, and then gradually to gray as the shadows lengthened across her yard. She thought about the woman on the phone. She thought about someone deliberately planning to contaminate her pool. She thought about the satisfaction or anger or catharsis they might have felt in that moment. She thought about whether making them feel powerless, which was what discovering and prosecuting them would do, would make anything better. 3 weeks after the pool incident, Karen was in the community mailbox area when she ran into Lisa Chen, the wife of Marcus Chen, her pool maintenance person. They'd never spoken directly before, though Karen had seen Lisa around. She worked from home, was usually seen in yoga clothes, had 2 children who seemed undisciplined compared to Karen's standards. "Karen," Lisa said with a smile that seemed a bit tight. "How's the pool doing? My husband said you got it all fixed up." "Yes," Karen said. "The remediation was successful." "That's good," Lisa said. She pulled bills from her mailbox, seemed to hesitate, then looked at Karen directly. "I heard about what happened. I think it's terrible. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry it happened to you." "Thank you," Karen said, and she was about to walk away when Lisa spoke again. "You know, that's a really nice pool," Lisa said. "I always thought so. Sometimes I'd drive by and see it from the street and I'd think, wow, that's a really beautiful pool. That person must really enjoy having something that nice." Karen wasn't sure what to say to this. There was something in Lisa's tone that she couldn't quite place. "It's been a good investment," Karen said finally. "I bet," Lisa said. "Must be nice to have something so perfect, something that's completely yours, something that nobody can touch or take away or—" Lisa stopped herself. "Sorry, that came out weird." "It's fine," Karen said, though it wasn't fine. There was something off about this conversation, something that was making her skin prickle. "My kids would love a pool," Lisa continued. "But we can't afford one. We're teachers, both my husband and I. Well, Marcus does the pool maintenance business now, but I'm still a teacher. We do okay, but not pool installation okay, so I live vicariously through people like you, I guess. Corinne didn't know how to respond to this. She felt accused somehow, though Lisa hadn't accused her of anything explicitly. Pools are overrated, Corinne heard herself say. They require a lot of maintenance. Maybe, Lisa said, but I bet you don't regret it. Corinne paid her property taxes and got her mail and drove back home. She found herself replaying the conversation over and over, parsing it for hidden meanings, trying to figure out if Lisa Chen had just been making conversation, or if there had been something more loaded in those words. Did you live vicariously through people like you, as though Corinne were some sort of aspirational figure that people envied, as though Corinne had something that others wanted but couldn't have, as though Corinne's perfection was somehow offensive to people who couldn't achieve the same level? Corinne spent the rest of the day researching Lisa Chen. She found her on social media, a Facebook profile with pictures of her kids, pictures of her husband, pictures of their modest house with a small deck and a patchy yard. She saw posts about teaching, about her students, about the challenges of trying to maintain a career and a family on limited means. And then she went back through Lisa's posts more carefully, looking at them chronologically. Months ago, Lisa had posted about how frustrated she was with people in my community who act like their wealth makes them better than everyone else. It had gotten several likes, several comments agreeing with her. Corinne searched through her memory, trying to remember if she had ever been unkind to Lisa directly. She couldn't think of a specific incident, but she also knew that she had never been particularly warm or friendly to her. Corinne didn't socialize much with people who worked in education. She didn't think they moved in the same circles. That was probably how Lisa saw it too. That evening, Corinne received another anonymous email. Same email address as before, but this time the subject line was, "You know who I am now." Corinne's hands were shaking as she opened it. "Dear Ms. Morrison," the email read, "I've decided to tell you it was Lisa Chen. She rented the truck. She dumped the manure into your pool. She thought about it for weeks before she did it. She was angry at you for things you never even knew you did. This information is not actionable. She covered her tracks well, and even with this information, you won't have enough evidence to prosecute her. But now you know, and now you have to decide what to do with that knowledge." Corinne read the email 5 times. Then she read Lisa's Facebook posts again, seeing them through a new lens. The frustration with wealthy neighbors, the comment about how some people's lives seemed so perfect it was obscene, the vague post about taking action to make yourself feel less powerless. Corinne called Officer Matthews. "I have information about who contaminated my pool," she said. "I can give you a name." "Okay," Officer Matthews said. "Go ahead." "Lisa Chen," Corinne said. "She rented a livestock truck using a fake name. She dumped the contents of that truck into my pool on Sunday morning, June 15th. "How do you know this?" Officer Matthews asked. "I was told." "By who?" "Someone who witnessed it." "Are they willing to come forward?" Officer Matthews asked. Corinne thought about the woman on the phone. She thought about the anonymous emails. She knew that person wouldn't come forward. That person had made it clear they weren't interested in helping Corinne prosecute anyone. "No," Corinne said, "but I can tell you where she rented the truck, Henderson Farm Equipment. She probably used a false name, but you can check credit cards, driver's licenses." "Ms. Morrison," Officer Matthews interrupted, "I can't investigate someone on the basis of an anonymous tip and circumstantial Facebook posts. I need actual evidence." "Then get a warrant," Corinne said. "Check her credit card records, check her bank accounts, look at her timeline that morning." "I would need probable cause to do that," Officer Matthews said patiently. "An anonymous email accusing someone of a crime isn't probable cause." "So she just gets away with this," Corinne heard her voice rising. "She just goes unpunished." "I don't know that she did anything," Officer Matthews said. "Not based on what you're telling me. If you have actual evidence, if you witnessed her doing this, or if you have the person who did witness it willing to testify, then we can proceed. But I can't haul someone in for questioning based on a hunch." Corinne hung up. She sat in her living room as darkness fell. She had the identity of the person who had violated her pool. She had the knowledge of why they'd done it. But she didn't have proof. She didn't have evidence. She didn't have a mechanism for justice. She could confront Lisa directly. But what would that accomplish? Lisa would deny it and Karen would have no way to prove it. Or Lisa would admit it and then what? Karen could sue her, but the case would be weak without physical evidence. She could share what she knew with the neighborhood, but with no proof, she'd just look like she was spreading rumors about a neighbor. The only actual power Karen had was the knowledge itself. The knowledge that Lisa Chen had done this. The knowledge that Lisa had succeeded in violating her in a way that Karen couldn't prove, couldn't prosecute, couldn't punish. The next morning, Karen woke up with the sudden realization of why this arrangement was so carefully constructed. Whoever had sent those emails, whoever had told her about Lisa Chen, had given her just enough information to know the truth but not enough to act on it. They'd given her the frustration of certainty without the satisfaction of justice. It was elegant in its cruelty. Karen spent the next week wrestling with whether she actually believed Lisa was guilty. She looked for ways to verify the information. She searched for any connection between Lisa and the truck rental company. She found nothing. Derek Thompson confirmed that he didn't know Lisa Chen, that there was no reason for her to have his email address or his truck information. But the woman on the phone had been very specific, and the anonymous emails had come from that same woman. There was an internal consistency to the information that suggested it was true. Or it was an elaborate hoax designed to drive Karen crazy. By the second week, Karen had begun to lose weight. She wasn't sleeping well. She found herself staring at Lisa Chen's house when she drove past it, trying to see something in the structure or landscaping or yard that would confirm or deny her guilt. She looked at photos of the truck rental from a different angle, trying to see someone in them that might be Lisa. She was obsessing, she knew she was obsessing, but she couldn't stop. On the 14th day after the anonymous email, Karen received an invitation to a community pool party. It was being held at the shared community pool, the public pool that she rarely attended. The HOA was throwing it to celebrate the successful remediation of the incident and the return to normalcy in the neighborhood. Karen almost didn't go, but then she realized that not going would seem like she was hiding or upset, neither of which she wanted to communicate. So she put on a swimsuit and a cover-up and went. The pool party was, in a word, awkward. People greeted her with the careful warmth of individuals who had experienced recent conflict with someone and weren't sure if the conflict was resolved. Jim Caldwell was there, looking uncomfortable, staying on the far side of the pool. Derek Thompson was notably absent. Lisa Chen was there. She was in the pool with her 2 children, laughing at something one of them had said. When she saw Karen, she smiled and waved, a gesture that seemed genuine. Karen didn't wave back. Karen stood at the edge of the pool and watched Lisa. She watched how she played with her kids. She watched how she interacted with other people at the party. She watched how she seemed genuinely happy in a way that Karen found impossible to fake. And she made a decision. She was going to confront Lisa, but not about the pool. Or rather, she was going to confront Lisa about something bigger than the pool. Later that evening, after everyone had left and the community pool was closing for the day, Karen drove to Lisa's house. Lisa answered the door in a robe, clearly surprised to see her. "Karen," Lisa said, "Hi, is everything okay?" "Can we talk?" Karen asked, privately. Lisa glanced behind her, probably checking if Marcus was nearby, then stepped outside onto the porch, closing the door behind her. "I need to ask you something directly," Karen said, "and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you dump manure into my pool?" Lisa's face went very still. For a moment she didn't say anything, then slowly she shook her head. "No," she said, "I didn't." "Are you certain?" Karen asked. "I'm certain," Lisa said. "I won't pretend I haven't thought about it. I'll even admit that I wanted to. But no, I didn't do it. I wouldn't do something like that." Karen studied her face, looking for tells, looking for signs that Lisa was lying. But all she saw was a woman who seemed genuinely sad. "Someone told me it was you," Karen said. "Someone sent me emails claiming you rented a truck and dumped." "I know what they claimed," Lisa said. "And it wasn't me. I don't know who did it. I'm guessing the whole thing is more complicated than anyone realized and someone is messing with you now." "Why would they do that?" Karen asked. "Because they want you to suffer," Lisa said. "They want you to obsess about who it was and whether you can prove it and what you can do about it. It's a way of extending the violation. It's a way of making sure you never feel fully safe or at peace about what happened." Karen felt something cold move through her. because Lisa's explanation made sense. Because the whole architecture of it, the anonymous email, the specific details, the knowledge that she couldn't prove anything, was perfectly designed to extend the torment. I think whoever did this originally, Lisa continued, wants you to drive yourself crazy. I think they want you to suspect everyone. I think they want you to lose the ability to trust your own neighbors, and the person sending those emails is just helping them do that. But if it wasn't you, Karen said, and it wasn't Jim Caldwell and it wasn't Derek Thompson, then who was it? I don't know, Lisa said, but it could have been anyone, anyone with a truck and an axe to grind, anyone who was angry at you for something they thought you did. And the not knowing is probably worse than knowing, right? The not knowing leaves room for suspicion of everyone. Karen realized that Lisa was right. Over the past 2 weeks, Karen had started viewing the entire neighborhood with suspicion. Any neighbor she hadn't been particularly warm to was now a suspect. Any person she'd ever been unkind to was now a possible perpetrator. I need to tell you something, Karen said. I think I was the problem. I think I made you feel small. I think I made a lot of people feel small by the way I treated them, the way I judged them, the way I acted like my way of living was the only acceptable way to live. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said finally, you kind of did. But that wasn't why someone dumped manure in your pool. That's just life. Sometimes people get hurt and sometimes people hurt other people and sometimes it doesn't make sense. But I'll tell you what I know. The best thing you can do now is stop trying to figure out who did this and start thinking about why you're the kind of person they thought it was okay to hurt in the first place. Karen left Lisa's porch and drove home. She looked at her pool, gleaming in the moonlight, perfect and pristine and utterly empty of joy. Karen would stand at the edge of her patio and look at it, and all she could think about was the contamination. All she could think about was the violation. The pristine turquoise water might as well have still been brown. By mid-July, Karen made a decision. She called Marcus Chen. I want to close the pool, she said. I want it filled in completely. I don't want it anymore. Marcus was surprised. Fill in a $43,000 pool? Karen, are you sure? I'm sure, Karen said. I want concrete poured where it is. I want it gone. Can I ask why? Marcus asked gently. Because I don't want it anymore, Karen said. That's all the reason I need. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that Karen had spent her entire life believing that perfection was worth pursuing, that control was worth maintaining, that having nice things was an achievement that justified itself. The pool had been a symbol of her success, her discipline, her ability to have exactly what she wanted. And then someone had destroyed it, and she'd been unable to punish them adequately. And she'd realized that all of her systems, all of her careful planning, all of her documentation, all of her logic, couldn't actually protect her from violation. The pool had to go because it represented a way of living that Karen no longer believed was sustainable. She spent the next 3 weeks planning what would happen to that space. Instead of pavement, she planted a garden. She hired a landscape designer, a young man named Tommy who didn't seem particularly impressed by her specifications and insisted on his own vision instead. Karen wanted to argue, but she didn't. She let him do his job. The garden that emerged was beautiful in a way that Karen's carefully planned landscaping had never been. There were wildflowers that Tony had deliberately chosen for their slightly chaotic arrangements. There was a small sitting area with stone pavers that were intentionally irregular. There were plants that attracted butterflies and bees, something Karen had previously discouraged because she liked control and cleanliness. When the work was finished, Karen stood in her backyard and realized that she actually liked it better than the pool. In August, Karen decided to have a neighborhood gathering. Not a formal meeting, but a casual afternoon where people could come over and see the garden. She was terrified of who might show up, of what the gathering might reveal or not reveal. But she sent out invitations anyway. Jim Caldwell came. He stood in the garden looking slightly out of place in his work clothes, but he was polite and calm, and he and Karen had a conversation that didn't require discussion of the pool at all. He told her about his farm, about the challenges of agricultural work in an increasingly difficult climate. She listened. She asked questions. She didn't make it about herself. Lisa Chen came with her family. Her children played on the lawn while Lisa and Karen sat in the garden sitting area and talked about teaching, about the challenge of raising kids, about the way the world seemed to be getting harder instead of easier. Corinne found herself admitting that she didn't have all the answers, that her life wasn't as perfect as it appeared from the outside. Lisa didn't judge her for this. Lisa simply listened. Derek Thompson didn't come, but Corinne received a note from him. "I appreciate the invitation. I hope things are working out better for you now. I meant what I said about not knowing the truth. Some truths are more complicated than others." David Finch came. They discussed HOA matters briefly and then moved past them. The conversation was easier than it had been before. Corinne was taking less personally now. She was less invested in maintaining her superiority in community dynamics. As the sun set and people began to leave, Corinne stood in her garden feeling something like peace. Not complete peace. She would probably never fully understand what had happened to her pool, never completely accept the loss of control she'd experienced. But something close to peace, something like acceptance. It wasn't what she'd wanted, but it was what had happened, and she was finally learning to live with that. One evening in late August, Corinne received one final email from the address that had been sending her anonymous messages. She almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of her. "Dear Ms. Morrison," it read, "I've been watching from the shadows and I wanted to tell you something. You were right about a lot of things. You were right that there's a system to the world that cause and effect matter, that people should be held accountable for their actions. But you were wrong about something too. You were wrong that knowing the truth would fix the violation. You were wrong that identifying a perpetrator would make you feel whole. And you were wrong that perfection was worth sacrificing your entire life to maintain." The person who did this still isn't entirely sure why they did it. Some mix of anger and jealousy and a desire to make someone else feel as small as they felt. That doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. And the truth is that forgiving them, not because what they did was right, but because understanding it is more useful than hating it, is what's going to let you move forward. "I won't contact you again. You're going to be okay." Corinne read the email once and then she deleted it. She didn't try to trace it. She didn't try to investigate the sender. She simply let it go. By September, life in Maple Ridge Estates had returned to something close to normal. The pool incident was discussed less frequently. New dramas emerged in the community: a boundary dispute, a neighbor's teenager playing loud music, a house that had been poorly painted and violated aesthetic guidelines. Corinne's life continued. She went to work. She maintained her house. She spent time in her garden, which she found surprisingly soothing, even though it was less controlled than her previous landscaping. She had coffee with Lisa occasionally. She waved at Jim Caldwell when she saw him at the mailbox. The question of who had contaminated her pool never became fully clear. There were theories, there were suspicions, but there was never definitive proof. Corinne had to accept that she would live in a neighborhood where someone had violated her, and she would probably never know for certain who or why, and there was nothing she could do about that. It was, she discovered, survivable. One evening in October, Corinne was in her garden when she heard a voice from the street. "That's a nice garden." She turned and saw an old woman she didn't recognize, someone from outside the community, walking past and looking over her gate. "Thank you," Corinne said. "Would you like to come in and look around?" The woman seemed surprised by the invitation, but she accepted. They spent 20 minutes walking through the garden while the woman asked questions about the various plants. At the end, the woman thanked Corinne and said it was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in her neighborhood that year. After the woman left, Corinne stood in her garden as the sun set, and she realized something that Richard had perhaps learned years ago, that Lisa and her family lived with constantly, that even Jim Caldwell had probably figured out. Life wasn't about having the perfect pool or the perfect house or the perfect image. Life was about the moments of connection you made with other people, the kindness you offered, the ability to be present and real and undefended. Corinne's pool was gone, but her garden remained, and somehow that seemed like a fair trade. In December, Corinne ran into Tom Bradley at the mailbox. "How are you doing?" Tom asked, and his tone suggested he actually wanted to know. "Better," Corinne said, and she meant it. "How are you?" "Can't complain," Tom said. "Though I do want to apologize for that thing I said at the community meeting about the truck in the preserve. I made it sound more certain than it actually was, and I feel bad about that." "It's okay," Corinne said, and she realized that she actually believed that. She'd spent so much energy trying to figure out what had happened, trying to solve the puzzle, trying to assign blame. But it was okay. It didn't matter anymore. Whatever had happened, and she'd survived it, and there was nothing left to prove. Well, I'm glad, Tom said. And I'm glad your pool situation worked out. I like your garden, by the way. It looks nice. Thank you, Karen said. Would you like to sit in it sometime? I could make some tea. Tom looked genuinely touched by the invitation. I'd like that, he said. As Karen walked back to her house, she found herself thinking about that anonymous person, whoever they were, who had sent the final email. They'd been right. She was going to be okay, more than okay, even. She was going to be something better than she'd been before. She was going to be real instead of perfect. And that, it turned out, was worth more than any pool.